Throughout my career, I noticed 3 core reasons for which interviews rarely go as planned. And I believe the top reason why interviews are so unpredictable is the job description itself. Because what happens here is that most candidates would expect the job description to be a lot more accurate than it actually is, and rightfully so, because why would an employer post an inaccurate job description? Well, in my experience, and I used to run an applicant tracking system, by the way, these things rarely work as you'd expect with job descriptions. When I was running the applicant tracking system, I was the IT guy, so to speak. And me as an IT guy, I had to both design and distribute and modify the job descriptions for our clients, right? But some would say, hey, okay, this was in the pest control industry, so maybe it's not as relevant. Well, 10 years later, I'm coaching people for, $500,000 jobs with Netflix and Google, and the problem is the same. Okay, so they still have job descriptions which are completely outdated. But because it's very convenient to clone a job description which used to work for filling the previous role, they would still use it. Moving forward, people don't have time to customize them, and you probably know by yourself how complicated it is to produce high quality marketing material. Building your story bank isn't a straightforward job. But long story short here, the job description oftentimes is nothing more than a marketing manifesto. So you should avoid over-relying on the information that's presented in there, and ideally try to find out what they're actually looking for, because the job description will never tell you some key details of when it comes to the competencies required in the ideal candidate. If they would share this with you, then everyone would prepare just that. Okay, so the first one would be job description. The second reason why job interviews are not as predictable as you would like would be the combination of, or the balance, I should say, between technical and behavioral. Okay, so what happens here is that many candidates expect job interviews to be more technical than they are behavioral, and then to be surprised during the job interview. In fact, just the other day, I've seen an email from Amazon explicitly mentioning that, hey, your screening round will be 80% technical and 20% behavioral. And then the email continued, and they recommended the candidate to prepare for that 20% behavioral 5 of Amazon's leadership principles, which, if you think in terms of Amazon's 14 leadership principles that are the most relevant for job interviews, it's already quite a lot, to prepare on 5 leadership principles just for the purpose of a screening round for a 20% of it. So there's even a disconnection even while they recommend you how to look at these job interviews. So long story short, what's the fix here? Well, the fix here is if you could predict the types of questions you might get asked during screening rounds in that situation, but any interview these days, questions are highly predictable. And this is a use case that you can use AI quite successfully on. And not to mention, there's candidates who already know these questions in advance. Some companies even share these questions in advance. But long story short, try to set the right expectations, try to evaluate what is the most important thing that you want to sell yourself on during the job interview. If the role is not even nearly as technical as you would expect it to be, then probably that's not the right role for you in the first place. So if you believe that it's a highly technical role, then you should prepare the technical side primarily, and of course, introduce yourself and all that stuff that's non-technical, but you shouldn't stress too much on the behavioral side. On the other hand, if you expect the role to be a very senior type of role, where your behavioral competencies would matter a lot, then yes, you would prepare on the behavioral side. And then if the interview is 95% technical, then chances are that role is not for you, because that role might be a lot more junior than you would have expected. right? So by preparing yourself on what you believe matters the most when it comes to applying for this role, you would increase your predictability of doing well in the job interview, not necessarily predicting the balance of technical or behavioral, but maximizing your chances to pass it or to do well within that job interview. And the third thing I like to talk about here, which is something that not many candidates expect to be such an issue in these job interviews, is building rapport with your interviewer. Okay, so a core reason for many interviews not to go as planned is because candidates cannot build a minimal rapport with their interviewer, and therefore they would have no idea how their interviews went. All right, so my advice to you would be to keep in mind that during the first few minutes of the conversation, there will be a rapport building phase. And it's not rocket science that if you get along with someone, if you have a little bit of connection, a little bit of chemistry, then you will understand how they evaluate you, and you will understand how happy or not they are with your interview answers, even if only for that 30 minutes or 1 hour job interview. But focus on building a better rapport with your interviewers, because you'll be surprised how many interviewers are actually willing to help candidates, willing to support you during the job interview, if only you listened to them during the occasion. So I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.